Hey, I'm Michelle with Balanced Health. I'm a family nurse practitioner and I specialize in helping people with weight loss. And so today I just wanted to talk about some of my best tips for people who may be just beginning their journey taking GLP-1 medications. So things like semaglutide, tirzepatide, Wegovy, Ozempic, Mounjaro, Zepbound, all of those. So one thing is a tip is to just be sure that wherever you are using, you do have a provider that you have access to and you can contact if you were to have any issues. Usually there's not severe side effects if your dosing is done correctly. But if you do happen to have severe side effects, you would want to be able to contact your provider. If you're having a lot of throwing up, that sort of thing, they may need to do some lab work. We want to make sure you're not getting too dehydrated. And then occasionally we can call in additional prescriptions for antiemetics like Zofran, for instance. So that's a tip. I know there are places you can go that you don't really have like an actual provider for you, and I would discourage that. There's so many places you can get it. Just keep looking. Um, Another tip I have is to have the right mindset. You need to go into this knowing that this is a marathon and not a sprint. It's going to be a long haul for most people, and you don't need to expect to take one shot and then the next day step on the scale and have lost 5 pounds. It doesn't work that way, nor should it work that way. You should really be aiming for a very slow, steady weight loss and really focusing on being able to implement some good healthy habits while you're on those medications so that you can have long-term success. So make sure you have good expectations. Another step is the dosing, to start low and go slow. So again, if the provider you're working with is just going by standardized dosing or just bumping you up quicker than you feel like you should be, then that's something you might want to consider is looking for someone that will work with you and really do small, what I call micro dosing, and just keep you on the smallest dose that reduces your appetite and then staying there. Um, you also need to be prepared for potential side effects. Those are about 25% of people do have side effects from these medications. And if you're aware of that, you know that going in, you can be more prepared. I tell my patients that typically, if they do, or if they're one of those 25%, the side effects should be mild. It should be transient. Usually, with after the first couple of weeks, your body kind of gets adjusted to the medication. Most of the side effects go away. One that doesn't typically go away is constipation. That's one that if you have that, which a lot of people do, you probably will have it the whole time. So just be prepared. Nausea is the most common. There are some sublingual vitamin B12 drops that you can put under your tongue that patients, they weren't around when I first started, or I didn't know of them. I'm sure they were. But I do have patients say that that does tend to help. Sometimes, if you get compounded semaglutide or tirzepatide, some of the pharmacies add B12 with it, and so you're kind of getting that with your injection, which can help with the nausea. If it's more than that seems to be taken care of, again, contact your provider because you may need an additional prescription, like for some Zofran. Fatigue is common also at the beginning. It's one of those that typically does get better. Uh, to just be prepared for that, and make sure you're drinking plenty of water and you're eating enough protein. If you're not doing those two things, that can really make your fatigue worse. Headaches are kind of common. Again, be sure you're drinking plenty so that it's not exacerbated by dehydration. And typically, most people can take a Tylenol or ibuprofen, that sort of thing. And then the constipation. Usually it's not with your first dose, but as it kind of builds up in your system and you have more impact from the medication, constipation is common. So oftentimes for my patients, I'll recommend they take stool softeners. Miralax is a good one. So fiber's good for constipation, but not always when you're on these medications because it can kind of bulk up your stool already that's slowed down by these medications. So sometimes that causes more GI issues than not using a fiber. for your constipation. I would make sure that wherever you're getting your medication is being sourced from a compounding pharmacy that is FDA approved. Again, there's lots of options, and if the place you're getting won't tell you, or they are getting it from a different place every time, that means they're probably getting it from the cheapest place every time. And you want to be sure that, in my opinion at least, I only want to take and I only want to prescribe medications that are coming from an FDA approved compounding pharmacy. When they have that sort of seal of approval, it means that FDA inspectors have gone into that facility and they go in periodically and make sure things are up to snuff, so to speak. They have high quality control measures, and if they don't meet those, then they get that seal of approval removed. So that's another tip that I would recommend. Okay, the timing of your injections. So for most people, and you just kind of have to see how you respond, but for most people, they have the biggest impact from the injection because it's once a week. So the biggest impact is typically 1, 2, or 3 days after their injection. So what I tell people is if you're, for instance, for most people, myself included, I'm more likely to overeat on the weekend. I'm not in my normal routine. We're going out to eat. There are things going on. So if that's the case and you really want to help with that, then I recommend you start by taking your injections on Thursdays. See how that goes. If you happen to be one of the people where it's really more 2 days out, you can adjust that. But if you do it on a Thursday or Friday, then typically you're going to have the most appetite suppression over your weekend. And then as the week goes along and you're getting ready for your next injection, then oftentimes your appetite's starting to come back a little bit more as you're nearing your next injection. So that's another tip you might consider. Um, Also, I recommend, especially at the beginning, that you kind of track your progress. Track when you do your injection. When you go to the bathroom, believe it or not, you can kind of like, how many days was that? And it's kind of something you need to stay on top of. Also, it really helps you be more mindful of the amount of protein you're getting, the amount of water. If we're not tracking it, it can be real easy to not really be getting enough of either of those. So I do have a simple journal that I've designed that's all the things that I typically recommend people track, and I'll put a link to it below. But you can just use a notebook even. But I typically would track the day I gave myself injection, how many units I did. It's also, I didn't have this on my list, but another good tip is when you get a new vial, and get a little sticky note and write down how many units is in that vial. So let's say it's a 100 unit or 1 ml vial. So 100 units, write that down on the top. Then when you take a dose, subtract how many units you just took from that 100 so that you have an ongoing tally of how many units are left in your vial. Because it's really hard when you get those vials, it looks like there's hardly anything in there from the get-go. And it's such a small amount, it's really hard to gauge how much is left. So that's another tip is to track that. But track when you use the restroom, track how you're feeling, your fatigue levels, your appetite suppression, your weight. Obviously, you don't have to track it every day, but for those that do, you can kind of see trends with that as well. Then if you have any weird symptoms or maybe even not associated to the injection, but you're not sure, you can track that too, so that you can mainly look for patterns and trends. Then another tip is to be sure you're using this injection along with other healthy habits, other lifestyle changes. If you simply don't change anything, you just take an injection, you're really not going to have sustainable improvement in your health, and you're for sure not going to be able to maintain your weight loss because you're off the injection, your appetite returns, you go back to eating what you've always eaten and the amount you've always eaten, then obviously the weight's going to come back on. So really use the opportunity while the injections make it a little kind of easier to really work on some other healthy habits. So in particular for my patients, I really like them to focus on prioritizing protein. I give them all a protein goal to aim for every day. drinking plenty of water, and I usually also recommend some intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is very helpful. It helps these injections work even better, but it's extremely helpful for long-term success. So those are the ones that I typically recommend. Um, it's also good to have some support. If you have a friend that's doing this or a spouse, there's a ton of Facebook groups for other people that are doing it. It's just kind of good to have some other people to chat with about things going on, and just having a buddy in your weight loss partner. So there's lots of places out there you can find someone. So I do think it's helpful if you have some support. Obviously, if your family knows and can support you as you do make some changes. Um, and then another tip is really important, and that is to avoid sugar, especially if you drink alcohol or if you drink regular sodas. Those are two things that can really, or just eating lots of sugary foods, carb foods. All of those things will really hamper these injections' ability to work. One of the main ways they work is by leveling out and reducing our blood sugar levels. And if you're pouring in regular soda, for instance, you're really just kind of wasting your time with the injections. You may have a little bit of success, but it's not going to be go very well, and it would be, you would not be able to really maintain that kind of weight loss. They're just really empty calories. And so those, if I have patients, and I have occasionally where, their appetite's reduced and we're just not seeing any results like we think we should, I'll say, what do you drink? And a lot of times it's soda or juice. Most adults don't drink juice, but juice is terrible. Don't drink that at all. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful. And if you have any questions or you have some other helpful tips, you've been a beginner and you thought, oh, this would also, I wish I'd have known that, just comment below and let everybody else know that too.